Hi, my name is Obri Hargis and I'm from Montessori 101. I'd like to bring to you today a Montessori meditation. It comes from the book that she wrote called The Child in the Family, where she focuses on parenting advice for parents. It's not a very commonly read book, so I'd like to read to you a few things that I found really important inside this book. Montessori gives us some principles that parents should follow. She says, now let me enumerate the principles which will help the mother to find the best way for her child. And in today's time, if she had written this book today, she would probably have substituted parents. The most important, she says, is to respect all reasonable forms of activity in which the child engages and try to understand them. Let's think about that. Reasonable forms of activity. So the first thing when you see a child doing a behavior that you might find a little bit annoying or you might find concerning, you need to think to yourself, is this reasonable? Is the child's behavior reasonable? Now, it might be that what the child is doing is going to aid the child's development because all children develop along a path. We're all given these genes in our DNA that tell us how to develop. Everybody's path is going to be a little bit different. But what the child is doing is trying to grow up. And the child is going to do all kinds of activities that may be pleasing to us and may be displeasing to us. And what the child is really doing is trying to develop his or her body, mind, spirit, and grow. So, is an activity reasonable? There's an example that Montessori gives in this book, and it's about the baby who, when held in arms or in a high chair, continues to throw things on the floor. And a lot of parents will stop the child from doing this and say, oh, we don't throw. But let's stop and think. Is this reasonable for a child to throw? Is it reasonable for a baby to drop things on the floor? What's the child doing? Exploring gravity. Child is using physical gross motor skills with the hand and the wrist. And those things are natural. So Montessori wanted us to take a look at that and say, okay, it could be reasonable. It's annoying to me. It's kind of maybe socially unacceptable, but it could be reasonable. And then she wanted us to figure out ways to support the child in that growth. So if the child is in a high chair, throwing food on the floor or dishes on the floor, so common. I get this question all the time from parents. What do I do? My kid keeps throwing stuff on the floor, my 1-year-old, and I'm trying to get him to eat his food and he won't, he just wants to throw. Well, one solution would be to ask yourself, is it reasonable to throw? And if your answer is yes, it's reasonable to throw, give your child something else to drop onto the floor. Hold your baby and go outside and let that baby drop leaves onto the ground. I know when my little ones were in a high chair, I would tie with a string some toys to the high chair and then just let the baby throw the toy down and the toy would kind of dangle on the string. And we just played that game over and over. I would get the toy, bring it back up, throw it. Those kinds of games are reasonable. Now, how about food on the floor? Is that reasonable? Some parents put a big mat down and say it's reasonable for this time period, so we'll just go with it and be messy. A Montessori solution might be to use a weaning table, and that would be like a little table close to the floor where the baby is not as inclined to want to explore gravity and would be more inclined to just focus on the food that's in front of him or her. So that's another solution. So today's assignment is to look at your child or your children and really look at their behavior, especially when they're annoying you or when you see them doing something that's just really not really acceptable. And I want you to think first, before you say a word, is what they're doing reasonable? And if it is, you can allow it. And if it's reasonable but not socially acceptable or culturally acceptable, then maybe you can find a different way for the child to practice that activity without interfering with the social rules of your culture. Okay? So, thank you for listening today, and I'll talk to you next time with more meditations. Bye-bye.